There you go.
All right.
We're rolling. All right, okay. Well, welcome again, everybody. So I'm Coach Chris. I did a quick intro, but essentially my running background too, I've done now 30-something marathons, I think. But I manage the program, so I will help coach, and I'll be at a lot of the workouts. I help answer a lot of the questions, both online and in person. But I also assemble our coaching teams. We actually have a large number of coaches. I have about 25 coaches on staff across all the different FFC clubs, and some of them are basically just tailored for Bright Pink athletes. So they're there for you guys. They have a wide range of experience. I think I'm like a novice coach compared to the amount of marathons I've done relative to some of the other coaches. We have some coaches who've done over 100 marathons. So a lot of really good experience, and all of them are Road Runners Club of America certified. So they've got a lot of good education to back up their hands-on experience. But I'm going to go through a couple slides basically and just kind of introduce you guys, especially for first-timers. I know there might be some things you have questions about and things you aren't even thinking about yet as well. So feel free to ask questions, stop me at any point, even though we're recording it for people online. So welcome. This talk is going to be catered to just kind of basic Marathon 101 questions, but also we'll talk a little bit about Bright Pink. This is the big race that we have most of our athletes training for. We have half marathoners as well, but this is the Chicago Marathon start line, which is always something that looks really intimidating when you first look at it. But if you're not familiar with the Chicago Marathon, it's actually one of the largest marathons in the world. It raises a lot of money for charity as well. So I think on average, it is also probably in the top 5 in the world in terms of spectators as well. So it's one of the best races to do as a first-timer if you want a lot of people cheering for you. So we did the introductions already, but I know a bunch of you are first-timers. So I'll talk a little bit about the Chicago Marathon and kind of running in general. I like to say, it might seem like a very, we call it monster of a challenge. It can seem like a very scary thing to do a marathon, but we firmly believe that it's just about starting slow and learning your correct pace. And we do a lot of coaching on getting you guys ready and dialed in on that right from the get-go. And that's sometimes the hardest thing for a first-timer to really get down right, is figuring out what is that pace. And I call it the fun pace. It's the pace that's casual and conversational. So a lot of our training, we focus on really educating you guys. How can you run efficiently? How can you avoid injuries? We coach a lot on running form and technique. A lot of people don't even think about like the way you run and the biomechanics of that. We'll cover a lot on fueling and hydration, what to eat, both before and after the workout and during race day as well. But FFC is our health club partner for Team Bright Pink, and FFC's background is on personal training, and so we provide a lot of strength guidance as well, cross-training, things to do, but how can you make yourself stronger? And I'm very big on the science of metabolism, so I'm a certified coach in several different disciplines, but one of my passions is actually on the science of metabolism. So I'm a metabolic efficiency training specialist. I do all sorts of fun things with science and numbers, so if you like that side of things, I can talk your head off about how you can dial yourself in terms of paces and all that. So we did a couple intros on our coaches already. There's a couple others there. So Coach Joy, she's upstairs coaching a swim workout, and Coach Shelley just popped in the back here too. But like I said, we have 20 plus coaches, over 400 marathon finishes among all the coaches. So pretty experienced group. I'm pretty proud to say, and I'm pretty sure I haven't compared us to everybody in Chicago, but we definitely have one of the deepest and biggest and most experienced coaching staffs when it comes to running in the area. And we obviously help coach mostly charity athletes, Bright Pink. And have fundraised a lot. I was adding it up over the years. I think now it's over $3 million that we've fundraised over the years, both with coaching in person and online. So this is the beautiful Chicago Marathon. This is like mile 1.5 or so. Definitely one of the most epic races. I mentioned they call it a tour of all the neighborhoods in Chicago. So we always advertise that it hits the 29 different neighborhoods of Chicago as you run through it. the details, I'm not going to cover this so much right now. This is more for race day and race prep. But the thing I like to point out is literally almost 2 million spectators now is the estimated crowd. So the only race that really rivals that is the New York Marathon, which we have a lot of people training for as well. And it's super well supported. Compared to any other marathon in the world, you're spoiled. Aid stations are a city block or more long. It's just one of the best produced races around, and it's relatively flat. There's not a lot of hills, so it's a great first-timer issue. And we'll give you guys more specific tips on race day, but if you aren't familiar with it, definitely check out the website. There's a lot of good content that you'll also get emailed to you. One of our main ways of supporting you guys, though, is actually through a Facebook group. So if you haven't joined this group yet, definitely join it. It's where a lot of our coaches are checking daily to answer questions. It's where we'll post a lot of the material too, like I'll post this presentation there, copies of the training plan, but it's also a fun and interactive way to keep tabs with other people and to stay motivated throughout the season as well. So it's definitely a good group. If you haven't joined it, make sure you do that because that's a great way to contact the coaches. All right, so I'm going to cover the marathon training in general. We actually merge our training groups, so we have both half marathoners and full marathoners training together. And some people like to do both, and sometimes that's actually a good thing to do. Even though the half marathon is pretty close to the full marathon race day, you can actually do both, and we have the training plan designed so that you can do both if you want to have a kind of tune-up training event. Typically, one of the starting points, though, I tell people is figure out your training pace. And that's sometimes a hard thing. You might have backgrounds in half marathons, 5Ks. There's a lot of good tools out there. One of the first things we do in the first couple of weeks of training is help you figure out, how should you be running or what pace should you be running. Generally, if you don't have a good baseline, but you've at least run a 5K, we usually say your marathon pace might be on average about 2 minutes per mile slower than that, which seems like, wow, that might be pretty slow. There's also calculators, so there's a lot of good ones. One of my favorite ones is the one by Jack Daniels, not the adult beverage, but one of the most well-renowned running coaches. He did a lot of work with altitude training and VO2 for the Olympic marathoners back in the day. And they just launched a couple of years ago a really nice website where you can just plug in any type of baseline, a 5K, a half marathon, and hit calculate, and it'll actually recommend not just where your marathon pace might be, but where all your training paces should be. So when we talk about different paces for different runs, this is a really good tool. They also even have a phone app too that you can download. But we'll talk a little bit about this in training. But this is a good, if you don't know and you're trying to find a good starting point, there's a lot of good resources like this out there. And that helps us provide you guys with guidance on where to pace. Because my hardest thing sometimes is convincing athletes to run a slower pace than they're used to. But what you'll realize is there's a big, what I call a metabolic benefit to doing that. Marathon running is all about finding that effort level where you can rely on your body's fat stores as energy and burn more fat for fuel, which is nice because it also helps you get leaner if you're trying to get to a leaner body composition. And when you run too fast, you generally burn more carbs. So I'll leave it at that in terms of the science. But we have people of all different ranges. We have people who are trying to qualify for the Boston Marathon and run really aggressive times. We have back of the packers who are doing their first marathon and just want to reach that finish line. There is a formal cutoff time for the marathon. But if you follow the training plan, we always say if you can run a mile, you can run a marathon. That's always been our motto for our training program at FFC. So we have different pace groups. We'll have coaches that are helping different pace groups throughout the season. We guide people whether they want to do walk-run ratios or steady running all the way through. But just know that there's different aspects of the training program. We also guide, if you're a more aggressive runner, we have a version of the training plan that guides you on doing some additional mileage to really dial it in. At a high level though, like weekly training routine, like hey, what should I really be doing? This is how a typical training week usually breaks out, just to give you kind of like an expectation of what we recommend. And you don't need to do everything. Usually I tell people if you can get at least 3 quality runs in a week, that's sometimes all you really need. Typically the weekly routine Monday is generally an easy day because if you did a long run the weekend, you want to start in kind of an active recovery mode. Tuesday, we generally do an off day, or what we call cross-training day. Wednesday, we begin to add a little bit of speed, and that's what we call a tempo or threshold run. So that would kind of be more like a 10K, or for a marathon, or a half marathon pace. And that's really to develop your speed and your efficiency. We also, in our training programs, offer coached track workouts too, interval workouts. So if you want to improve performance, really improve your biomechanics, and teach your body how to run very efficiently, that's a really, really good workout. And then Fridays, we generally take an off day before we do our long runs on Saturdays. And then Sunday becomes, again, an off day, or what we call an active recovery or cross-training day. And we typically try to keep that routine throughout the season. So you're doing lower intensity when you're doing the long runs and the first run of the week, and you're doing a little bit more high intensity in the middle of the week. One of my, you'll see in our training plans, we guide on heart rate. So if you use a heart rate monitor, I don't know if, did anybody here, any of you guys use a heart rate monitor other than the coaches that are here? If you are looking to get one or wants to, there's a lot of technology, a lot of watches now have the optical heart rate, there's chest straps. We'll guide on all of that. So if you have questions about that, you'll see that terminology in the training plan as well. That's the typical week. So weekdays, I always say a golden rule, and this is a good number to have in the back of your head, is we want you to get about half of your training volume or more in during the week. The biggest problem I see for first-timers especially is the new thing is how long these long runs get. And a lot of people just focus on the long run, the long run, the long run. And if that was like the only run you did all week, that can be a really big shock to your body. So if you're not used to running a certain amount of distance, it's hard to do that all in one session. So typically, if you're building up to doing, let's say, a 10-mile run on the weekend, we generally want you to do about 10 miles during the week as well. So that way your body's already adapted to that volume. And when you do it on the weekend, it's not that much of a shock from your normal routine. And that's kind of a cornerstone of most training plans that you'll see is based around that idea. Even if you just do 2 5-mile runs and then a 10-mile run on the weekend, or you do 3 5Ks roughly, you're getting that type of volume distribution. And that's a great way to adapt. That's a great way to teach your body to become more efficient. In our training plans, we generally guide you on time. Just putting time in on your feet. We're not always distance focused. The long runs will be distance focused, but during the week, we're just trying to run for time. And that's for a couple different reasons. That way the training plans can be adapted to any speed of athlete. And it also makes it more fun and social. So if you're doing group runs, if you're running with someone who's faster, you both run for the same amount of time out, and then turn around, come back, and you'll probably finish right around the same time. And that way, after each group run that we do, we foam roll, we get together, we talk. So it becomes a fun social thing as well. And then we also, most of our runs will do some good post-run exercises too, whether it's strengthening, foam rolling, light massage work, range of motion work, and that's really what helps you avoid injuries in the long run. So that's kind of a typical weekly routine. And then cross-training, I know people are asking about that. Cross-training is a term that's thrown around a lot. A lot of people think it just means any other type of training. Generally, though, what we want cross-training to do is be something that's complementary to the exercise of the thing you're doing. So if you're running for a marathon, figuring out what exercises will actually work the muscles you want to work to complement your running. So oftentimes that can be just a similar aerobic sport like cycling. Muscles are moving in the same way, just low impact. It can be swimming. That can serve a purpose also of fighting off inflammation. Let your body have more like an easy workout. And then strength training, whether that's we call it dynamic or functional, like lateral movements, moving in ways that you're not typically doing when you're running, just in one plane of motion. But we also have, if people are interested, this is always a hot topic these days, is high intensity interval training. So combining aerobic and strength training into intervals. We also have some hill training that we do, and we have some fun new treadmills, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But generally cross-training, it can mean any type of activity that you're doing that's complementing the training that you're already doing. Speed training, sometimes you'll hear this term, fartlek. It's a Swedish word for speed play. So in the running world, you might see that word thrown around. Sometimes that means unstructured intervals, like just going for a run and doing a little faster work, slowing down, just kind of playing around. But also people use that sometimes to talk about doing interval training. And we actually meet on a track where we do running around, and we'll have a coach there to guide you on doing that interval training to improve performance, but also improving your running mechanics more than anything. Running faster kind of teaches your body how to run more efficiently in the long run. And a lot of it's based on working out for a while and then recovering or walking or just letting your heart rate come back down. So we have those typically on Thursdays. Gear, I know people have a lot of questions about gear too, so I want to touch on this real quick. So what to bring, what to shop for. If you're brand new to training for a marathon, sometimes there's a couple new things that you hadn't really thought about. So make sure you have running specific shoes. Every year we do see some people who show up in non-running specific shoes, but that can make a big difference in terms of comfort and injury prevention. So ideally get a new pair of shoes too, one that's not too worn down. If you've had a pair that you've been using for more than a year, you might want to get a new pair at the beginning of the season that you can then break in. Technical shirts, meaning something that's made out of a fabric other than cotton to avoid chafing. Both shirts and shorts, compression layers as well. If you've ever seen, sometimes people talk about like nipple chafing in a marathon, or they have some pretty nasty videos online of men especially who will have like bloody nipples and things like that. It can happen if you have enough chafing. So usually, as long as you wear a technical shirt, something that's moisture wicking, you can avoid that. There's also technical socks, meaning socks that aren't purely cotton. They're made out of either blends of wool or any moisture wicking material. They can be a little more expensive, but they are definitely worth it if you're logging the miles that you are for a marathon. Compression shorts, I mentioned that both for men and women. Sometimes guys are wondering, like, well, what do I wear for underwear? And there's actually compression shorts that you can wear either under regular shorts. But again, the goal of that is simply to avoid any type of chafing and make you comfortable. So any running specific shop like Fleet Feet, Roadrunner, those are great local shops that you can go to and find a lot of this stuff. If you're training a lot on your own, I definitely recommend some type of hydration product. Nowadays we have people having both handheld bottles that are kind of ergonomic and just clamp onto your hand comfortably, hydration belts that you can wear, hydration backpacks. So if you're running in places where you're not sure if there are water fountains, definitely get those. Luckily when we do our long runs, we know there are supported aid stations that are set up throughout the run, so you don't need to bring hydration, but we usually always encourage it just as a best practice. And then nutrition fuels, you'll have to eat some type of sugar, something to keep you going. So playing around with different products can be a fun learning experience during the marathon training. Also thinking about any technology. If you're running with a watch or a phone, there's a lot of ways that you can get little race belts and things you can put your phone in, different pockets. I have a pair of compression shorts that actually have like a cell phone pocket on the inside, so I can just hide my phone and it doesn't bounce around too much. So there's a lot of different options in that regard. You might hear us talk about MyZone. MyZone is simply just a brand of heart rate monitor. So if you're using a heart rate monitor, that's a brand that we carry in a lot of our health clubs. Women definitely getting a sports bra that's an athletic or even like a running specific sports bra can make a big difference. A lot of the running shops like Fleet Feet and Roadrunner, they actually have a whole variety of different products to look into. We have a lot of coaches that have tried a lot of different sports bras and they can give you some great suggestions. So if you have like specific brands or you want a good starting point, post in the Facebook group because that's actually a really active topic in the Facebook group usually. Sunglasses, sunblock, protect yourself from the sun. We haven't had a lot of sunshine, at least here in Chicago, but it is warming up, so definitely make sure you got that. A hat and visor, again, sun protection. Usually we say don't run with music. If you're running with a group especially, You want to be able to hear the coaches and other athletes. You want to hear cyclists coming by you if you're on the lakefront trail. But I know it can be a hard thing if you're used to running with music. It's okay to use it. Years ago, they actually made it a rule that you couldn't wear headphones in a running event, and they've since gone away from that. So yes, you can wear headphones if you want to, but ideally, in the group training at least, try to avoid wearing headphones. Nutrition, and we had somebody asking about nutrition. We will provide tips throughout the training program. A lot of people ask, like, what should I eat before and after workouts? Are there different things I should aim to do? There's a lot of nice tools out there too. I don't know if, do any of you guys use any type of like nutrition tracker, like MyFitnessPal, like those types of apps? It can be a good learning experience. We also have dietitians on staff at all of our locations, and they actually will come and do nutrition talks. So they'll come to some of the runs afterwards, and they'll be there to answer questions. We actually have one in this room, I think next Thursday at this exact time too. So if you guys want to come by next week, and you'll see those throughout the training season. But generally,